I am recording this so I could send it to you. And thank you, Catherine, for inviting me, and thank everybody who is here. The U.S. Open in golf is going to be taking place very shortly down the road from you over at Wingfoot in Mamaroneck. And in some ways, it's fitting because the beginnings of golf in the United States, actually, it started in Westchester in 1888. But golf before Westchester was played. It was played in Scotland. The beginnings, of course, the Gilded Age. It was the J.P. Morgans and the Anderson Cooper's family, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and Astor, and all of these people who had a lot of money ended up in Westchester playing golf. Now, Yonkers, New York is where the first official golf course in the United States was. And if you go up North Broadway, go past the Department of Motor Vehicle, about 1 mile north of there, there's this sign. This is an old picture of this sign because in New York State, they do not keep up with the paint jobs on these signs. But anyway, the first golf course was on North Broadway. The first green of the original 6-hole golf course was established by St. Andrews, and it's across from a church right now on North Broadway. But that was not the first place that golf was played in the United States. It's close, but we'll get into that in a minute. It's unclear how golf started. There is no record of how golf started. Maybe the Romans played, who knows? Maybe China, it was in China. We know that the first written record of the game of golf was in the diary of King James II of Scotland, because he banned the game in 1457 because it was an unwelcome distraction to learning archery. And I guess archery was important because when you were in wars, you shot bows and arrows, I suppose. I don't think there were too many weapons going around. Of course, Scotland was in a lot of wars at that point. In fact, they gave up, Scotland got the Shetland Islands, among other things, in various treaties from various Scandinavian countries. And I was in Scotland in 2014, and I got to see, well, I didn't get to see Loch Ness Monster, just where Nessie lived. But we think golf originated in Scotland in the 15th century, and then the 18-hole golf course was created in St. Andrews in 1764. Golf's first major and the world's oldest tournament in existence is known as the Open, now commonly known as the British Open, which was not played this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but in Ayrshire, Scotland in 1860, the first British Open, or Open, took place. Now, you know about kids, right? You know all about kids. Kids could be renegades. Kids could be obnoxious. Kids don't listen to you. James II banned golf, but his grandson, James IV, actually liked golf. He kind of reinstated it. Now, we don't know if he was playing secretly or not, but he came out as a golfer, probably disappointed his grandfather. So he lifts the ban in 1502. He becomes a golfer. And he had his own golf clubs by 1503 or 1504. I cannot speak Scottish. I speak on cruise ships. I've met a lot of people who speak Scottish. I never could understand them. But anyway, 4 golf cubbies and balls to the king that he played with. That's in his diary, that he went out, played golf somewhere. Golf was documented as being played at the Musselburgh Links in East Lothian, Scotland, as early as March 16th, 1672. And Musselburgh Links, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, is the oldest golf course in the world. Mary Queen of Scots played golf. Unusual, because women were told that they couldn't play golf, particularly in the United States. But Mary Queen of Scots played golf at the Musselburgh Golf Course over in Scotland. So among the things that she did, she was probably one of the first women who played golf. She reputedly played there in 1567. Now, apparently, Sir John Foulis of Revelston had a bad day at the golf course on March 2nd, 1672. I don't know what these scores mean. 4-3 golf balls, 0, 15, 20, or 152, 0. But we know one thing. He lost at golf at Musselburgh. So they were, I wonder if he lost any money. I wonder if there were any side bets at that point. Hey, the MacDonald brothers, they played golf. That's a famous painting, of course. And the MacDonald brothers played golf. And they're in their tartans. They're in their best. The oldest surviving rules of golf were compiled in March of 1744. You know, why is it always gentlemen golfers or honorable company? You know, I knew a few golfers. John Daly, I'm not sure you would consider him a gentleman. But anyway, the oldest surviving rules of golf, March 1744, for the company of gentlemen golfers, later renamed the Honorable Company of Edinburgh golfers, played at Lith, Scotland. So Scotland has the monopoly on golfers at this point. The oldest golf tournament is the Open. It was played at the Prestwick Golf Club in Scotland, and Scottish golfers won the earliest majors, and that would lead us to Westchester. Now that the preamble is out of the way. There were a couple of guys in Westchester who went to Scotland and played golf in Scotland and decided to bring it back. So welcome to Westchester, and that is Wingfoot. That is a picture from the Hockey in Harlem golf tournament in 1995 with my son there, who decided he was going to meet a whole bunch of New York Rangers players and Bobby Hull. And Wingfoot held that fundraiser for the ice hockey in Harlem people. But 1888, we have two Scotsmen from Dunfermline, Scotland, John Reed and Robert Lockhart. And they decided, you know what, we got all this stuff around here. We got a golf ball, there's, got a golf ball, we got golf clubs. We brought it over, and it's a nice day here in February. And it's also George Washington's birthday, February 22nd. There's a cow pasture over on Lake Avenue. You're not going to find that cow pasture anymore because houses are on there now. But let's go to the cow pastures. Now, Lockhart had some hickory shafted clubs and gutta percha balls because he had gone on a business trip to Scotland. He brought it back with him. And with another guy, John Upton, they decided, hey, there's enough land here. We could lay out 3 holes. And with that, the first 3 holes were played in Westchester on a warm February day. But it would not last that long because the next time they wanted to go out and play golf, they ran into this, the blizzard of 1888. And I don't think there's anybody alive from 1888 who could talk about the blizzard, but it hit on March 11th, 1888. It was one of the biggest blizzards in the Northeast ever. It killed 400 people, 55 inches of snow in some area. Down in the city, everything came to a halt. There were snow drifts, powerful winds from the storm. Whatever electricity was probably knocked out. Thank you, Con Edison. And golf was put on hiatus for a little while, but not that long, because by April, Reed and Lockhart they went over to a 30-acre meadow that was owned by the neighborhood butcher, John Schatz. And that was over at North Broadway in Shonard Place, where that sign is today. That's across the street from the St. Michael's Ukrainian Church, and they laid out a 6-hole golf course, which was theirs exclusively for a little while. By November, they decided, you know what? Why don't we be like the people in Scotland? The people in Scotland, they like golf. So Reed decides it's time to get a club organized formally. And officers were elected, and Reed was the president. And Reed made sure that more golf equipment, golf balls, were brought in from Scotland. And he found some other people who were interested in playing golf. And by 1 year after they played golf for the first time over on North Broadway, spring of 1888, their little golf club had 12 members. By 1892, they're still over in Yonkers. They're still over on what would become Route 9A or Route 9. They move over to Palisades Avenue with an apple orchard, and there was an apple tree next to the first tee. Frank Chirkinan was around then he probably would have put a camera on that apple tree so you could see people hit the ball off the first tee. This is 1894. This was a very gentleman's game. This is in Yonkers, and you know, you got one guy smoking a pipe there, and notice there are no women here. And I bring up that because women would become essential to golf in Westchester very, very soon after this. Back in 1894, the National Amateur Championship was held. October 1894, over at the Gray Oaks 9-hole course on the Sawmill River. L.B. Stoddard, who was part of St. Andrews, defeated Charles B. MacDonald of Chicago. And MacDonald was kind of a sore loser here. He complained, well, it's not really a championship. You didn't win the championship because there's no national organization. So how could you say you won the championship? We just played together. So there is MacDonald, who also would end up doing some things in Westchester. So finally, they decide, you know what? It's time for a national organization. Now, if you take a look at where these clubs were, this was not for commoners. The St. Andrews secretary, founding member, who is Henry Talmadge, invited the representatives of 4 leading clubs. There were clubs opening all the time in the United States in the 1890s. Chicago, Shinnecock out in the Hamptons, Newport up in Rhode Island, and the Country Club of Brookline, Massachusetts. Brookline would eventually become the home of the Kennedy family. And they all go out to dinner in Manhattan, and they come up with this new organization. It's called the United States Golf Association. Talmadge is the first secretary. MacDonald, the sore loser, is elected the vice president. The first USGA-sanctioned United States Amateur Championship would be over at Newport at the Country Club. MacDonald would win. And he'd be happy, of course. He wins, and it was sanctioned. Now, I wonder if it wasn't sanctioned, whether he would have complained. It wasn't a real tournament. Well, he won. It's sanctioned, so it's no big deal. Meanwhile, for all of us who have taken the 4 train in our lives, you might know at the end over at Jerome Avenue and 233rd Street, you look to your, depending on how you come off the subway, you look either to your left or right and you see a golf course. Well, that was the first public golf course in the United States over at Van Cortlandt Park. And it became public because there were a bunch of people living over in the Bronx, in Riverdale, who wanted to open a golf course, except there was a scarcity of land in New York City. But there was plenty of land in Van Cortlandt Park. So the Van Cortlandt Park Golf Course over in the Bronx opened on July 6, 1895. And the popularity of the sport continues and continues and continues among men to become more popular. And this course came about because of a group of local businessmen could not find private lands. And the city stepped in and said, hey, we got this land here at Van Cortlandt Park. We'll open it up, but it's got to be public. And they said, okay. And it's the first public golf course in the United States. And anybody could play on it. So the game of golf is finally open to the average guy as opposed to the gilded people, and the popularity soared. The average New York resident in Westchester wasn't very well populated then, but if you lived in Westchester and you lived in the Bronx and you lived off the subway line, you could go play golf over at the Van Cortlandt Park Golf Course. So if you're an average guy, you might line up alongside the celebrity. And golfers were organized different type of clubs where they got out there to further enjoyment of the game. Now, the private clubs were proliferating in Westchester, and there is a reason why for that. I did a talk in New Jersey, and we were talking, it was Madison, New Jersey, and we were talking about golf clubs out there, and I said, no, you aren't the first. The first were in Westchester. Why? Because the billionaires, they weren't billionaires, but Gilded Age people, built the railroads, right? The IRT, all those other railroads were built by Vanderbilt and those people. And so they were able to get into Westchester, and there was plenty of land in Westchester. And these guys had money, and they wanted to play. They wanted their own playgrounds. So all of these courses, which still survive to this day, well, most of these courses survive to this day, were built by people from the Gilded Age, the Vanderbilts, the Astors, and all of those people. The people in Yonkers decided they wanted a real 18-hole golf course. And so they found the golf course on some property. Now, if you go up or down the Sprain, get off of Jackson Avenue, you go west on Jackson Avenue, about 3/4 of a mile, you'll see what is now the St. Andrews Golf Course. That opened up in 1897. And some of the members of the club at that time included Andrew Carnegie, and the architect, who was eventually killed, who built Madison Square Garden 2 or 3, I forgot which one, probably Madison Square Garden 3, Stanford White, Jack Nicklaus. That's the first time I met Nicklaus was in 1983 at that golf course, because he was in charge of redesigning the course. St. Andrews is the oldest club in continuous use. It's now filled with condos up on Jackson Avenue. But Nicklaus came in and they kind of changed it, and there's housing on there and all that other stuff now. And there is Carnegie. That is 1899, and that is Carnegie on that course up on Jackson Avenue, on the Yonkers Ardsley border up there, along with Scarsdale. Well, I guess it's Scarsdale, it's Ardsley, and it's Yonkers at that point. And there he is, 1899, Andrew Carnegie. Women were not welcome. Women were told, stay at home, you're not welcome. Well, these women had means. And these women were going to take the "you're not welcome" slogan from their husbands. And they wanted to play golf. And the baseball players of Westchester were very happy that they decided to play golf. Women's liberation in the mid-1890s. These women took a stand, but they had the means. They were married to these guys. So John Reed's wife, Elizabeth, and several of the other St. Andrews women decided, we have money, they won't let us play, we'll play by ourselves. So they leased some land on North Broadway and established this Sagkill Country Club. Now, that was 1895. They moved to another site. They still had money, so they moved to another site overlooking the Hudson River. And by 1896, they had 100 members, mostly women. Think of this, 1896. Think of how many businesses there were in the United States that catered almost exclusively in the sports field to women. They also had men. And they also opened the golf club up on Sundays. And Westchester was loaded with blue laws. You weren't supposed to do anything on Sunday in Westchester, including playing golf. Women didn't care about the blue laws. They operated this club. It's their money, their rules. We're not listening to local municipalities in Yonkers. And there is the Sagkill Club. Now, you probably, if I was with you, you wouldn't be able to read this at all. So you might be able to read it on Zoom. Sunday golf. Can't play Sunday golf. A jury at Yonkers finds player not guilty of breaking the law. There was a man who decided to play golf. And his name was Benjamin Adams. And he wanted to play golf. And he wanted to play golf on Sundays. And he was arrested and ticketed. And he demanded a jury trial. And he got the jury trial. And this is a special to the New York Times, June 7th, back in 1896. In a courtroom crowded with prominent residents of this place, the question as to the right of a man, even though it was a woman's course, a man, to play golf on Sunday in Yonkers was decided here, 10-day, by the discharge of Benjamin Adams. Mr. Adams was arrested last Sunday for playing a game on the links of Sagkill Golf Club. He was tried before Judge Kellogg in a jury of 6 and was discharged, but only after a hard-fought legal battle, during which there was an angry exchange of words by Judge Kellogg and Joseph F. Daly, one of the attorneys for the defendant. The decision was received joyously by those who play baseball and members of the Sacco Golf Club, of which the defendant is a member. Because of the women, you could play golf, and the baseball players could play baseball in Westchester on Sundays. Talk about women's liberation. There you got it, back in the 1890s. There is Cornelius Vanderbilt. Does he look like Anderson Cooper? Anderson's one of his relatives. The Ardsley Country Club hosted the 3rd Women's U.S. Open in 1898. Some women began playing, thanks to those women in Yonkers. The Ardsley Country Club members, Jay Gould, Vanderbilt, J.P. Morgan Chase, William Rockefeller. I don't believe William was a snake oil salesman, but they had all the money, the Rockefellers, and other notables of the Gilded Age. And that was established in 1895 on the banks of the Hudson River, and it was called the Ardsley Casino. And MacDonald was around. He would build golf courses in Westchester, but MacDonald started building golf courses in Chicago. And for some reason in Chicago, at least in the 1892 Chicago World's Fair, in the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, those two World's Fairs were connected with sports. The 1892 World's Fair with golf, the 1933 World's Fair begat baseball's all-star game. Arch Ward came up with that idea. I'm not sure who came up with the idea in 1892, but MacDonald was told to lay out a 7-hole course in conjunction with the 1892 World's Fair. And it became a very popular golf course in Chicago. And so he's asked to design another 2, one of which in Wheaton, Illinois, which became the Chicago Golf Club. They were the first 2 18-hole golf courses in the United States. And there is John D. Rockefeller, spent a lot of time playing golf in Westchester. Knollwood opens over in Tarrytown off of 119 in 1894. Some of the members include the Bouviers of Bronxville. The Bouviers, well, eventually there would be a Bouvier by the name of Jacqueline Bouvier, who was born in 1929, who became the first lady of the United States when she married a former Bronxville resident by the name of John F. Kennedy. The Kennedys lived off Pontfield Road over in Bronxville. So the Bouviers were there, so were the Rockefellers, so were the Vanderbilts. And there is the legend that Bobby Jones, the great Bobby Jones, met with a club member by the name of Clifford Roberts. This is probably around 1920, somewhere in there. And they discussed the creation of what would become the Masters Golf Tournament, Augusta, Georgia, the Augusta National, in the Knollwood Grill Room. And anybody who knows of Westchester sports knows that Bill Mazer used to eat at the Knollwood Grill Room. Other courses came on. The Bedford Tennis Club added golf in 1896. The Scarsdale Club in 1898. The Wackabuck Club in 1912. Blindbrook was in 1915. And in Harrison, New York, there was a 10-year-old kid running around by the name of Eugene O. Sarazen, who anglicized his name and is known as Gene Sarazen. He was born in Harrison in 1902, Native American. His parents were poor Sicilian immigrants. He began caddying in 1912 at local golf clubs. Took up golf himself. He developed his skills. As a caddy, he taught himself how to play, and he became one of the greatest golfers of all time. And he did it here in Westchester, being a country club rat, going around caddying, making some money, and then playing when he could. Sarazen would win 39 PGA tournaments. He was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame in 1974. He was the Associated Press Male Athlete of the Year in 1932. and the first winner of the PGA's Lifetime Achievement Award in 1996. Sarazen would have many battles with Walter Hagen. Bobby Jones, Hagen, and Sarazen were the dominant players in the Roaring 20s. Bobby Jones was one of those guys in the Roaring 20s who was known globally. Him, along with Babe Ruth and Al Jolson and Rudolph Valentino and maybe Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, all known in the 1920s, the Roaring 1920s. Their rivalries expanded interest in golf around the world, and the United States would become the golf power in the 1920s. Scotland and Great Britain would take a back seat. The Winged Foot golf course, the U.S. Open 2006, the last time I was at an Open. No, I was there in the 1990s, but I was at that one in 2006 because I remember Greg Norman giving up in the playoff in the 1980s, 1990s over at Winged Foot. Winged Foot is hosting this year's Open, which is next week. It's hosted 5 Opens: 1940 U.S. Amateur, the 49 Walker Cup. The Walker Cup, named after Herbert Walker, George H.W. Bush's uncle, Herbert Walker, who was also a minority owner of the New York Mets in the 1960s from Greenwich. PGA Championship on the West Course. The U.S. Open played there, will be played there. It was supposed to be played there in June, but it's been pushed back because of COVID. The East Course has been the site of 2 U.S. Women's Opens, the inaugural U.S. Open, and the 2004 Amateur was played over both courses. Now, 5 years ago, I was in Atlanta, and I was there for a family function for a wedding. And I decided to take a look at some things in Atlanta, like the Martin Luther King Center. I also went to the Oakwood, the Oakland burial grounds. And I went, and because I was told there were some really famous people there. And I went there, and I saw Bobby Jones' grave there. And there's a T there with a note. If you could look closely, somebody left a note for Bobby Jones. And what people do is they take their putters to the cemetery and they putt. And that is why there's a collection of golf balls in front of the grave. And I guess somebody there asked Bobby Jones for some tips. Bobby Jones, of course, is legendary. Young people don't know who he is today, but he's legendary for the early days of golf. The PGA held its first championship here in southern Westchester. Saiwano Country Club, founded in 1900 by Mount Vernon golfers. Mount Vernon had people like the Warner Brothers living here. Dick Clark lived here. E.B. White lived here. You must have E.B. White books over at the Ride Library. The club would move to a different location than Mount Vernon and settle in Bronxville in 1913. And the 1916 U.S. Open was played at that course, and Donald Ross designed it. And Long Jim Barnes won the first PGA championship there, the final match over Jock Hutchinson. In 2016, CBS sent a crew up to that location as a 100th anniversary retrospective of that club's first PGA championship. Now, here's one for you, the Quaker Ridge Golf Club over at Scarsdale. A.W. Tillinghast built it or designed it, and it's on a property that the British Army used in 1776. They camped there, and they defeated George Washington in the Battle of White Plains, and Washington lost a lot of battles. And every year there was a reenactment, except for this year, a reenactment of the Battle of White Plains, which the U.S. lost. But think of that. On those grounds, the British Army camped out. But then again, in 1776, it was British territory. The club would open in 1918, and some of the luminaries who played at that course included Louis Gimbel of Gimbels, Samuel Bloomingdale's. There's still a Bloomingdale's not far from that course up in White Plains, and some obscure writer who just had at that point written one song. I think it was called Swanee at that time, George Gershwin But at that point, George Gershwin was going from song plugger to writer. MacDonald and his engineer, Seth Rayner, designed and oversaw the construction of the initial 9 holes in Sleepy Hollow. The board of directors at the Sleepy Hollow Country Club is a who's who. John Jacob Astor IV, who would perish in the Titanic a year later, April 15th, 1912. Cornelius Vanderbilt III, Edwin Julius Berwin, and others. But the funny thing about golf was that if you were a pro, you were looked down upon. You were an amateur, you were a big deal. The amateur game, far more popular. Bobby Jones probably was the greatest amateur, although Sarazen could make a claim as well. Jones won 5 U.S. amateur championships between 24 and 30. In 1930, he won the U.S. Open, the British Open, U.S. Amateur Championship, and the British Amateur Championship. He was the only one who ever did that. Like I say, professional golf was looked down upon in the early half or the first half of the 20th century. It wasn't until the 1940s and 50s that people began to take professional golf seriously. During the 1930s, if you were on the amateur circuit, you were at the top of the sport. But there was no money in being an amateur. And eventually, because of that, you would find, or you would see that Bobby Jones would not be able to continue as an amateur. But Bobby Jones made a lot of friends. He quits in 1930, and there's a little interesting story here that he was interested in 1930 in starting his own private golf clubs, and he begins to make instructional films for Warner Brothers, for shorts, for Saturdays at the movie theater. Why Warner Brothers? Well, the Warners lived in Mount Vernon, and the Warners played golf. So he probably intersected with the Warner Brothers, because Jack was the only one who really was out on the West Coast. The rest of them were here. And he probably intersected with them in Westchester, and he started to make the instructional films for Warner Brothers. He gets it in his head, I want to build a golf course. And he does. He builds his first golf course in Augusta, Georgia. It opens in 1933. The first Masters takes place in 1934. Horton Smith wins it. He gets $1,500. No money on the tour at that point, but he's got to have his travel expenses paid for. The tournament is heard on radio. So the radio audience gets to listen to some announcer telling them what's going on in Augusta, Georgia. Radio, I did radio golf. It's deadly. There's not, you can't really keep up with it on radio. TV, it's great. Radio, no. It was a 4-day event, 3-day events. It was not a 3-day event, 4-day event, and it ushers in a new era of golf. And there is Bobby Jones playing in the Masters in 1934. Now, he did not initially plan to start the Masters. He wanted to bring the U.S. Open to the course. It didn't happen for various reasons. So Jones and Clifford Roberts, remember, they met back in Tarrytown, decided, you know what? Let's hold our own annual event. Let's have our own event. The Masters. It works. It changes the sport. The Babe. The Babe, the greatest woman athlete of the first half of the 20th century, Mildred Didrikson Zaharias. She acquires her nickname during Sandlot baseball games with neighborhood boys because she batted like Babe Ruth. Very talented basketball player in high school. She was recruited during her senior year in 1930 to do office work at the Employees Casualty Company of Dallas. But that wasn't her job. Her real job was to play semi-professional women's basketball for that company team, the Golden Cyclones. But there's a problem with Babe. See, she's not of the country club set. She's not. She's off the streets. Between 1930 and 1932, basketball, 2 finals, national championship, All-American each season. The AAU Championships, 1932, the prelude to the Los Angeles Olympics. She's in 7 events. She takes first place in 5, the shot put, javelin, baseball throws, 80-meter hurdles and long jump. She ties for first in the high jump and finishes 4th in the discus throw. All of that stuff, She qualifies for the Los Angeles Olympics in 1932, and she qualifies in 3 events and breaks the world records in 3 events. Gets the gold medal in the javelin hurdles, and despite clearing the same height as the top finisher in the high jump, she was awarded the silver medal because she went over the bar head first. Weren't supposed to do that thing. Foul at the time. And she takes up golf. And she's good at golf immediately. Fort Worth Women's Invitational, November 1932. She finishes second. Next April, Texas Women's Amateur Championship. She captures the title. This is where she meets head-on with the women. Women don't like it at all. So from the more socially polished members of the Texas Women's Golf Association, led by the United States Golf Association, they ruled her ineligible to compete as an amateur because she's off the streets. She's not of the country club sect. Years later, she regains the amateur standing, and she goes on to win 17 consecutive tournaments, including the British World Amateur Championship. She's the first American to win it, and she turns pro in 1947. Why? Well, she's one of the women to establish the Ladies Professional Golf Association. And this is to provide a handful of professional women golfers a circuit where they could win some money. And she was the LPGA's leading money winner between 49 and 51. She gets cancer, it's terminal, and she's gone. Now, in the television world of the 1950s, Bing Crosby's clambake was a big deal. Bob Hope would get to golf later on in the 1960s. Had a friend by the name of Shelley Saltman, the late Shelley Saltman, who passed away in February of 2019. Andy Williams was one of his clients. Glenn Campbell was for a little while. And he was very involved with the San Diego Open, known as the Andy Williams Open. And one day I'm talking to Shelley, and I say, Shelley, tell me about this. Tell me why celebrities were a big deal. And he said, well, he did the Andy Williams. He did the Jackie Gleason Durrell Open down in Miami. And he said the golf set thought if a celebrity hosted it, it was worth something more than the average tournament back in the 60s and 70s. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was the host of the Hartford tournament. Johnny Hart, who did a comic strip, was the host of the tournament up in Binghamton. So Shelley said we always wanted a celebrity there because we knew we could get more publicity for it. Crosby loved golf, and the clambake started in 1937. But after World War II, it became one of the tour's most popular events. Now, the people who were behind the Palm Springs Desert Classic, and celebrities hung out in Palm Springs in the winter. Yeah, it was a nice tournament, but you know what? It just lacked the pizzazz. You know, pizzazz. Crosby, that was pizzazz. Later on, Andy Williams, pizzazz. Jackie Gleason, pizzazz. How sweet it is. So they're looking for somebody who hung out in Palm Springs. Jack Benny hung out in Palm Springs. But Bob Hope was a golfer. And they said, you know, Bob, how would you like to be the host here? No. Nope, not interested. They signed Chrysler on as a sponsor in 1965. And Bob Hope's TV shows were sponsored by Dodge and Chrysler. And the people over at Chrysler said, you know, Bob, we signed up this tournament. We're the presenting sponsor. It's in Palm Springs. You spend a lot of time in Palm Springs. You know, we think you should host it. And he did. He was rather reluctant in initially doing it, but he ended up really liking it. Ben Hogan was one of the stars of golf when it goes from amateur to professional. He won the money title 5 times in his career, won 4 U.S. Open titles, won the Masters twice, the PGA Championship twice, single British Open. 1953, he won the Masters, the U.S. Open, and the British Open in the same year. But Hogan was not electrifying on the golf course. This is the time when television and golf and Palmer and Mike McCormack would all get together, along with a guy who was a director at CBS named Frank Chirkinan. Bryon Nelson was also a great golfer. He was the first golfer PGA Tour to win more than 10 events in a single year, 18 of them in 1945. He also became the first player to top 50,000 in winnings in a single year, earning $63,000 in 1945, which was a war year. It was pretty good. But it would be the 1950s. Television would meet golf. And the guy on the left is Arnold Palmer. The guy on the right was the President of the United States, who also liked to play a little golf here and there, Dwight Eisenhower. And there is Palmer and Eisenhower. And Palmer would become a megastar worldwide. Ike Liked Golf. Now, the first golf tournament that was broadcast nationally really wasn't broadcast nationally, but it was on ABC. ABC had 14 stations in 1953, and it was the World Championship of Golf. It was on for an hour a day. The tournament played outside of Chicago, just 14 stations, and if any stations who were non-affiliated, well, it didn't matter if you were affiliated or not. If you owned a TV station in the 50s, you could cherry pick, and some others probably cherry picked this tournament in 1953. But it would be in 1954 that golf would explode off the TV. Now, there was a guy by the name of Deacon Palmer, who was the professional at the 9-hole Latrobe Country Club. His family lived on the golf course, and he had a son named Arnold, and he dreamed of playing golf for a living. And he wins the U.S. Amateur in 1954, and that serves as a launching pad for his career, and all sorts of things come together rather quickly.
In Detroit.
That is a guy by the name of Frank Chirkinan. Joe knows who Frank Chirkinan is. If you're not a golf fan, you probably don't know who he is. But the man who was called the Ayatollah by Pat Summerall, go ask the Ayatollah what he thinks, is the guy who really accelerates golf into the homes. He worked for CBS for a very, very long time, and he's a guy who really is one of the fathers of modern golf, the Ayatollah. Now, if you watch golf today, you are watching what the Ayatollah did in the 1950s. He introduced high-angle cameras in new angles. He put roving reporters on the course, and he made sure to capture the unique blend of sounds in the game. The ball hitting the cup, making that sound. Now, you talk to golfers who watch golf on TV. One of the things I said, what do you know? What did you notice about the golf coverage? And they'll tell you the sound of the ball hitting the cup and spinning in the cup. That is Chirkinan. He changed the way the scores were delivered. Hard. What does the average golfer do to get to a hole? 4 or 5? And he's changed the scoring of golf. And he is a member of the World Golf Hall of Fame. Arnie is exploding at this point. Arnie's Army. And Chirkinan is directing the Masters, and Arnie is the star of the Masters. And Arnie's Army begins at the Masters. Near the Augusta National is a fort, Fort Gordon. It's a basic training camp where the Masters chairman, Clifford Roberts, who meets with Bobby Jones in Westchester, in Tarrytown, once is stationed as a soldier. When the Masters needed volunteers to help work scoreboards or just as ushers, helping people around, Roberts went to the local camp there, and he got some local GIs. And he gave free passes to all the soldiers who wanted to attend the tournament. And here is the legend of Arnie's Army. They knew Arnie was in the Coast Guard, so the GIs looked at him as one of their own. He was a military man, played the sport like he was leading a battle charge, treating par as the enemy. That was the enemy, and that line needed to be broken. And the soldiers came out to watch their man. One day on the back nine, one of the GIs working one of the scoreboards noticed the fans in uniforms. He made a small sign, held it up to the TV cameras. Arnie's Army. Arnie Palmer is Army. And that guy to his left is Mike McCormack. Arnie went to Wake Forest. McCormack went to school in North Carolina. They played golf against one another. McCormack loved golf. McCormack also was a really smart business guy who went to school on a guy by the name of Frank Scott. I'm not going to give you the total story about Frank Scott. Frank Scott was a traveling secretary of the New York Yankees. Frank Scott was at Yogi Berra's house in Montclair, New Jersey, one day in the 1950s, and his watch broke. And he's talking to Yogi, and he said, oh, my watch broke. And Yogi says to him, oh, don't worry, I'll give you a watch. He said, what do you mean you'll give me a watch? He said, I'll give you a watch. And Yogi takes him to another room, opens a drawer. He's got about 100 watches in there. And Frank says, why do you have all those watches? He said, well, whenever I give a speech, they give me a watch. And Frank Scott said, no, they're going to give you money now. And Frank was Yogi's rep, Mickey Mantle's rep, Willie Mays' rep. And he got money. And McCormack studied how Frank Scott did it and decided, I'm going to do that in golf. And I'm going to do that with Arnie, with a handshake. McCormack said, he makes the birdies, I make the business. Palmer becomes McCormack's first client. Deal struck with a handshake and launches the brand of an athlete as a global brand. So Arnie's winning all these tournaments. The popularity of the game is absolutely booming. McCormack, he's out in the golf course playing his brand of golf, and he's meeting with business people. And he understands television in the 1950s is catching on. CBS is a full network. NBC is a full network. ABC is a half network. But you look at television and look at what's going on in television, and they got golf. And I'm going to make Arnie a global name. He made the birdies. I made the revisions in the contract. While Palmer was playing major championships, McCormack was negotiating major endorsement deals. Palmer's first 2 years with McCormack, he went from $6,000 to $500,000 in endorsements. He pitched Pennzoil. It's a Howard Cosell story here. He's on the air one day and nothing's working well on radio and he's being recorded and he's complaining, I hear Pennzoil in my ear. And he goes on to, it's so simple, it's only radio, it's not a network TV production. Here at Pennzoil. But Arnold Palmer, he's pitching Pennzoil and he's pitching Hertz rental cars before O.J. Simpson in his spare time. And he's making a lot of money. And the estate is still making a lot of money. People who are buying his iced tea probably have no idea about Arnold Palmer's career, young people. But you go to the supermarkets and there are these displays. Arnold Palmer, half and half, iced tea, lemonade, sugar sweetened mix. Palmer's relationship with Augusta, he's there, he's always in contention. And the television screen, he becomes an American celebrity. Chirkinan notices all this. Now, Chirkinan starts producing the Masters in 1958. He's there through 1996. And as a TV producer, he's looking at this and he says, focus has to be on Arnie. Why? He absolutely fires up the screen. He also has that army that is following him. He's got this huge contingent of fans who are following him through the 18 holes. Palmer, only 4 Americans made the field after the mandatory cut at the Open in Britain. Only 2 of them made the cut. Palmer did. He already had won the Masters in the US Open, and he's attempting to match Ben Hogan's 3 for 3 for the 1953 season. He loses by 1 stroke, but he's there, and he gets other Americans to go there. He's got McCormack, he's got other Americans going there, and then he'll say, hey, Roan, get over here. Roan Arledge, Howard Cosell's guy at ABC. Roone Arledge takes over ABC TV, and they're looking for all kind of sports properties. They have one show. They have two shows, actually. They got the American Football League in 1960, a deal cut by a guy by the name of Jay Michaels, and ABC. Jay Michaels working for the American Football League. And after this, if you happen to be watching the football game after this, you might see Jay's son, Al Michaels, doing the play-by-play of tonight's football game after this. It was his father, Jay Michaels. Al Michaels' first job in the business was a gopher for Monty Hall on Let's Make a Deal. Anyway, Roone Arledge, he's looking for properties. He gets one, the British Open. So with Palmer going to the Open, other Americans going, others from various parts of the world, and Roone Arledge cuts a deal to get the British Open on. It's part of the Wide World of Sports package with Jim McManus, whose son Sean runs CBS News now. Jim McKay, part of that practice. Nepotism, huh? I don't know if that exists or not on TV. But anyway, so Palmer is there. It becomes global because Palmer is there. And there's Roone. Roone hired Barbara Walters to work with Harry Stern, making Barbara Walters the first co-anchor of a network news program in 1976. ABC, or the American Broadcasting Company, was a struggling TV network in the United States with little direction. Roone was brought in to write the SIP. Well, I was thinking Cosell when I wrote that, probably. Write the ship. I'm friends with his grandsons. He brought global sports into the American household, the Olympics, and the British Open. With Palmer and the Americans going to Scotland, players getting international, the British Open becomes one of the four majors, complete with the Masters in Augusta, the US Open, and the PGA Championship. Some players from the European Tour, along with Japan, head to America. Palmer may have saved the British Open as a major tournament. These are the rivals. One of the last pictures taken of them. That's Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player from South Africa. Clients of Mark McCormack. McCormack got all the big names. McCormack was literally running the PGA. Now, I was at the US Open. No, I was at the Westchester Open over at I think I froze there. Did I freeze? Yeah, I froze. It stopped. And let's start the video again. I was over in Westchester off of 127 at the Westchester Golf Club. And I'm talking to Fuzzy Zeller one day. And Fuzzy is telling me about the speech. The speech. He said, Arnie or Jack would come up to you. You're a young guy, and Arnie and Jack would give you the speech. We are independent contractors here. You don't screw up. If you screw up, if you mess up what I have, I'm coming to get you. Understand one thing. We're players. We run this thing. Me and Jack run this thing. So before you do anything, think of me and Jack. And it worked. It worked. They would not do anything to embarrass Arnie, because Arnie was making money for everybody, whether it was on TV or making money from endorsements, or Jack or Gary. And McCormack had that, and McCormack had many other players as well. Gary Player, South African, joined the PGA Tour in 1957. Within 2 years, he was winning. First major championship, 1959, US Open, rather the British Open. That was the first of the 3 Open titles he would win. He won the PGA Championship twice, the Masters 3 times. He finally completes his career Grand Slam in 1965, winning the Open. Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, wins 18 major tournaments. He said he had COVID-19 this year. He's about 80 years old now, and he recovered from it. He and his wife. He grew up with the Necro brothers, Phil and Joe Necro, who had much success in Major League Baseball. Phil Necro being part of the Cooperstown Hall of Fame in baseball. Nicklaus' greatest success, the Masters. 6-time winner of the tournament. Last time he won it, 1986. Palmer, Player, Nicklaus, all Mark McCormack's clients. McCormack cornered the market on players. Moving into the 1970s, golf hasn't changed very much. It's been very static since the 1960s. Also remember, I told you that Palmer greeted you, or Nicholas greeted you, because this is going to come up in a minute. Nancy Lopez in the 1970s was the darling of the golf world on the PGA. In 1978, she won 9 tournaments, 5 of them consecutively, LPGAs. She appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated in July, when Sports Illustrated mattered. Won the Bear Trophy, lowest scoring average, LPGA Rookie of the Year, LPGA Player of the Year, Associated Press Female Athlete of the Year. Tiger Woods. Arnold Palmer decided he needed to see what Tiger Woods was all about. Tiger Woods was probably famous since he was about 3 years old, when he was on the old Mike Douglas show. Let's see, Tiger Woods is now about, let's see, he turned pro in 1996, because he's 44 years old now. So I guess he was born in, 1978? So he was on Mike Douglas, the last years of the Mike Douglas show, with his father doing golf tricks when he was about 3 years old. So he was a known commodity in the golf world. And Arnold Palmer decided he was going to give Tiger the talk. Tiger was at Stanford University at that point. He's in the member of the NCAA. Tiger is pleased. Arnold's going to give him the talk. And Arnold takes him out to dinner. Arnold pays for the dinner. It's a violation of the National Collegiate Athletic Association rulebook, which seems to change on a daily basis, depending on what they want to throw in to make sure they screw the athlete as much as they can, and to make sure that they are in charge. And when I do mean screw the athlete, judges have said that in various court cases recently. Anyway, he takes Tiger out, buys him dinner. It wasn't a very expensive dinner, $30 or something. And Tiger kept the receipt. Arnold signed the credit card. He's got a souvenir. Somehow the NCAA gets hold of the fact that Tiger is out with Arnie, who's reading him the riot act. And the NCAA goes to the Stanford University golf coach and AD and says, we think we got a violation here. It's a violation. Well, one of your players went out and Arnold Palmer bought him a dinner. $30. So Tiger finds out about this and says, you know what, screw this. I'm not staying around here. I know what I'm going to do on the golf course. I don't need to stay here and play golf. I like the guys. I really like the guys. They're my friends, Casey Martin among the others. I don't want anything to happen to them. So he quits Stanford University and becomes a pro because of stupid, archaic rules by the NCAA. I think he made the right decision. I'm not quite sure about that, but I think Tiger Woods did make the right decision leaving. Woods has won 80 PGA Tour events, 15 majors, 14-1, going into the final round of a major where he has a share of the lead. In 2019 at the Masters, his last gasp, really, when you think of it, because he hasn't done much lately, he entered the final round, 2 strokes back, come from behind victory. He, along with Eugenio Sarazen from Harrison, Gene Sarazen, Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, one of the 5 players to have won all 4 professional major championships in his career, the career Grand Slam, youngest to do so. Golf has a lot of stars now, but they don't have a guy like him. It's Alan Shepard. Alan Shepard was a golfer. He was also the first man in suborbital mission in the United States in 1961, May 5th, 1961, in his Mercury spacecraft, and which was delayed and delayed and delayed. And a government employee, as he was, he said, you know, I'm sitting here, the payload is made up of a bunch of lowest bidders. 1971, he didn't go back in space because he had an inner air ailment, but he was cleared to go to the moon. And he went to the moon. He took golf balls with him in a golf club. February 6, 1971, he pulls out his makeshift 6-iron that he allegedly smuggled on board. I'm sure they knew that he had it. Brings 2 golf balls with him on the lunar surface, and as far as we know, he becomes the first and only person ever to play golf on the Earth and the moon. When asked where the ball went on the moon, he said, I think it's still going, 1/6 of gravity. Alan Shepard played golf or hit a golf ball on the moon February 6, 1971. So what's the future here? Well, golf has a lot of really good players, but they don't have players like Tiger Woods or Mickelson, Phil Mickelson, either one of them in terms of the popularity. They've got a lot of good players now. They have a lot of great players now, but none have reached Tiger's level. In 2017, they hit a record number of first-time players, 2.6 million. 2017, 23.8 million golfers. The big problem is affordability. Golf is an expensive sport. The other, well, golf courses closed, a lot of them, in 2017, 200. And we don't know, of course, the toll that COVID-19 is going to take on golf courses. And it might not be for years that we find out, because we have no idea how sports is going to change because of COVID-19. Will the recession make companies pull back? Will they not buy golf courses? Will they not buy suites in golf courses? Or will they not buy hospitality areas? That we don't know yet, and we probably won't know until there are treatments and hopefully a vaccine. So it's hard to tell. Now, we do know this year that Brady, Manning, Mickelson, and Tiger Woods drew a lot of people to watch them in their golf tournament, and that golf numbers are respectable this year. But the problem with golf is it skews really old. The people who watch golf on TV tend to be older, tend to be between 50 and 65, tend to be much closer to 64 than 50. The young demographics aren't good. And a couple of years ago, Turner put out Mickelson against Tiger in pay-per-view, and that probably will continue. So golf has to make itself younger, has to make itself more affordable. They need stories like Eugenio Sarazen. But majors are popular, and we're going to have a major next week. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Catherine, for inviting me, and hopefully some people will be able to see this on replay at another time. And that's me on MSNBC when I did my punditry on MSNBC. So thank everybody for showing up, and thank you, Catherine, for having me. We could open it up now for any questions or any comments.
Yeah, you forgot to mention that Arnold Palmer won his first U.S. amateur in Detroit.
Oh, there you go. Because you know that because you're in Detroit.
He won.
Yes.
That was his first victory. And also, he was really the, I read books on golf, and he was really the first collegiate golfer because he golfed at Wake Forest.
Yes. And McCormack was in North Carolina.
Yeah, he was really the first collegiate golfer. You talk about Tiger Woods at Stanford, but you didn't talk about Arnold Palmer at Wake Forest.
I mentioned it briefly. I did mention it briefly because of McCormack.
Okay, but he was really because most golfers before Arnold Palmer were rich guys already.
Yep. Yeah.
And they came in, and Arnold Palmer was a working class kid.
Yep.
I mean, his dad was okay, but Arnold Palmer was one of the first kids, really, when he was a kid, to get a full ride golf scholarship at Wake Forest.
Yep. Yeah, he did. Anybody else? Joe, don't leave. I'm gonna, if you could just type your email address in chat, I'd like to get it from you.
Yep. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, you knew Chirkinan.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Hey, look, you still have a great wealth of information in sports and business. I love that about you. You know, you've always been great at this, and it's a great presentation.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that from you, and my wife always appreciates you.
Sure. Okay, I'll drop you my in the chat my work email, and then hit me, and I'll send you the rest of my contact info.
Good, thank you. I'll send it to, and I will give it to Jim Williams as well.
Yep, and we'll jump on a side conversation. Take care,
Okay,
buddy.
thank you, Joe.
All right.
And thank you, Catherine, and thanks everybody else.
Okay, where, let me get these.
So I hope you enjoyed it, Catherine. And again, if we can, you can have it to put it up on the side.
Thank you, Catherine. I hope everything is well in Rye. I've flown over Rye a few times.
Yeah, all's good in Rye. All's good in Rye.
Yeah. So, I want to mention one thing about old Frank there, Evan.
Yeah.
He was Armenian.
Yes, he is.
And a friend of mine named Matt Karagian, who is here in Detroit, who he is related to Frank. And I met Frank at his wedding in like 1985.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I met the I met the Ayatollah. I knew who he was because, that's when, golf was still, Nicklaus and Palmer were still playing, and Gary Player and Fuzzy Zeller, and there was a young Aussie named Greg Norman.
Yep.
Matt introduced me to him, and he said, "Yeah, this is my second cousin, 3 times removed." And I'm going, "Holy cannoli, it's like a 5th or 6th cousin,
He was named, Summerall called him the Ayatollah, and it was not in golf. It was actually at the U.S. Open tennis. Anyway, I want to thank everybody. I don't want to keep anybody. Thank you so much, Catherine, for inviting me.
Thank you.
And hopefully we could do this again, maybe in person.
Maybe.
Maybe we'll be able to do this in person. Anyway, thanks everybody for being here. My name's Evan Weiner, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.